fault in the law of Moses because it could never set us free from sin.
Right.
He looked at that system. This system can't set them free from sin. So he didn't desire that system. He desired Jesus to come as a human being, as the representative of all human beings. And in being the representative of all human beings, he could take the sin of every human being that would ever live into himself. So that in taking their sin into himself, he could then absorb their death into himself. And in absorbing their death into himself, he could lie dead under the power of sin and death as a human being and the representative of all human beings. So that when the Holy Spirit would come and raise him up as a human being, as the representative of human beings, and conquer sin and death in a physical human body on behalf of all mankind, there could then be something that man could believe on that could cause that same Spirit to dwell in them and conquer sin and death in every human being that would believe on that Spirit.
Amen.
Without Jesus doing that, there is no Spirit.
Right.
There is no Spirit to come into the earth and raise us up. Death would still be reigning over me. God told Adam, from the dust of the ground you came, to the dust you will return. Because of this death now, this sin that's reigning over you. Was God lying?
No.
Was it a figment of God's imagination that death was reigning over people?
No.
So listen, there was a physical death reigning over people. It wasn't just a mental separation. A mental separation also happened. But there was a physical death reigning over people. Apart from an offering being made, there could not be the removing of the physical death. Period. That's why blood is needed for forgiveness. Forgiveness is not God was angry and now he's not angry anymore. And if you think that's what forgiveness is, you'll never understand why there was blood needed. Blood was needed to send sin away from us. Sin was reigning over us. The only way it could be sent away from us is if somebody took the wages of our sin into himself. And then that sent our sin away. That's forgiveness. God came and divorced us from sin by absorbing it into himself. And in the death of Jesus, that divorced our union to sin and death. Boom. Apart from that, there's no divorcing. Right? Those are critical points, man. Paul says over and over, there's no salvation apart from fellowshipping with the cross. And I don't mean going to heaven. I mean, there's no salvation from a life and an identity that's defined by this world outside of fellowshipping with the fact that I was crucified with Christ. Now, if I now believe that God didn't desire for Jesus to die on the cross, do you think I'm ever going to be thinking about how I was crucified with Christ? I'm never going to think about the cross ever.
Never.
If God didn't desire Jesus to die on the cross, then what am I going to be busy thinking about it for?
Exactly.
And if God didn't desire Jesus to die on the cross, then am I ever going to be identifying with what it is Jesus died unto? If I don't identify with what Jesus died unto on the cross, then how can I also die unto it? How can I find his death being manifested in my heart if I don't fellowship with the death he died on the cross? Paul even said that this was his prayer, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being made conformable to the death he died. Now, what was the death Jesus died? He died unto sin, meaning he rejected the persuasion that said who he is found, or the testimony of who he is found in what is manifesting in his body and what is happening to him on the cross. He died unto the Adam man. He died unto a life of self-justification. He died unto a life where he defined himself, or where he would define himself by what people said to him, by what was happening to him, or any of those things. He didn't stumble at the truth. You see, offense, we're talking about offense. Offense came to Jesus when he was hanging on the cross in order to get him to stumble at the truth and define himself according to what was happening to him, instead of defining himself by what the Father said about him. And so offense came to Jesus, pointing at what was happening to him and what people were saying to him and what people were doing to him, and it tried to get him to stumble at the truth about himself by getting him to take what was happening to him onto himself as his identity. He didn't stumble at the truth. He rejected that lie.
Right.
That set his heart free from offense.